Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clyde from African Media Australia, and tonight on this edition of African Knowledge, we will be dealing with the minds of Africans. This is a series that we're starting to discuss what is inside the minds of Africans. We know that the transformation of any society depends on the minds of its people. And as Africans, we ought to be able to analyze what is in our minds and how we can improve our minds, because ultimately development is all about how we develop our minds, how we create technologies, how we develop our economies, and all that has to do with mind. Quite often we get knowledge from many sources, including the Western sources, but the knowledge that we can produce ourselves, we don't always get to have a lot of that happening in Africa or by Africans. We need to produce our own knowledge as well as be able to consume the knowledge that we can get from other people and other countries. So that is a whole series that we will be we're starting today, and we'll be developing over many weeks as we move forward. So let me just encourage you, if you're watching, feel free to make comments, ask questions. I'll be displaying a number on the screen very soon. If you want to call, you can call and also intervene. We encourage you to share the feed so that other people will also be able to watch. You know, if you have something to share that is something of value, we can also have you as a guest or as a member of the panel when we have more of these discussions. So it's all about the African knowledge, and specifically tonight, we're talking about the minds of Africans. So let's just start by a simple question. What is in the minds of Africans? You know, what is in our minds? Now, it could be a very broad question, but it's one that needs to be asked. We know that obviously, you know, every person is a product of the environment, and that environment has many layers that has been compacted. So we talk about history. So I'm going to look at 5 elements tonight that I will be discussing, and then I will be having 1 or 2 participants who a guest that will be coming. The second guest is not yet confirmed, but the first one is confirmed. So Barry, Mustafa will be joining me later in about half an hour to discuss some of this. I will just make sure that I've got the details. I'm just getting a call from one of the participants, but that's okay. We will discuss with him later. So five elements that I would like to be able to share today in relation to the minds of African, looking at the mindset of Africans. And those elements are, I've got 5 words. I will just, so I'm having a little bit of some technical issues here, but it should be all right in just a moment. Just give me 1 second to get everything that I need, and it should all be going okay. So, excuse me. I've got the 5 elements. I will start with history of the African. If you want to look at the minds of Africans, we have to look at the history of Africa, and that's is obviously very important. When we talk about history, we talk about the kingdoms that have happened throughout history, and then there's culture. Besides the history, there's the culture of the people, and then in addition to that, there's education. Education is very important. The way you are educated will determine what is in your mind. And then the next element, sorry, there's a little bit of a There's a little bit of an echo on my sound. Again, some little technical issue, but I think it's all running okay now. And then there is the social conditioning. I call that community because it's all about the people that you are with. And then I will also be talking about the experience, people's experience, whether that is professional, whether that is personal. All those things do actually affect the way that we develop our mind. So that is a and that is important for us to look at African spirituality and how that affects Africans in general. Let me start with history. There are a lot of, I'll just share this screen. There are a lot of kingdoms that have existed throughout Africa. We can see a little bit of the Timbuktu, for example, which was biggest, I mean, one of the biggest center of intellectual activity in Western Africa, and that has obviously shaped the minds of Africans from a historical point. And we need to look at those elements that have contributed to that. And there are also many other kingdoms that have existed both in Western Africa as well as in Central, like in the kingdom of the Congo or the Lunda Empire. There's also in Southern Africa, where there are a number of kingdoms. All of these kingdoms have shaped the African mindset. And when you want to look into that, you have to see what are some of the main elements that we have inherited from the kingdoms that we all come from. Let me just again remind those watching, please, if you have comments, put them on, you can comment on Facebook or YouTube. You can also send messages, and I'll put the number on the screen soon. And you can even, I suppose you can call us and be able to intervene if you've got something to share. We will be just looking now into how some of these kingdoms have shaped the minds of Africans. We know that one thing is that the way the authority of the state was managed in those kingdoms do have some sort of consequences in the way the political authority is actually playing up today. But there's a lot of richness or wealth in those ancient kingdoms that we have not been able to draw much, because a lot of the history that we study in our own countries is very, very limited. In fact, many of our history books are still being written by colonialists, from outside. Even when they are written by our own people, many of them have been trained in Western universities. So even today's curriculum in the school is significantly determined by the Western curriculum. Is a Western-centered curriculum, and that is an issue that we need to be able to address. And it's surprising that even after 60 years after the independence, many African countries still haven't updated their curriculum. I'm talking, for example, even in my case, I come from the Congo, and I know it applies to for many other people in other countries where the curriculum is still very much that which was left by the Europeans. And that obviously has some impact in the way we view the world, in the way we view ourselves, and how we manage our own problems, our own society, and how we prepare our children to deal with the issues of the future. That is a big issue that needs to be addressed. So we have to find ways of drawing the best of those kingdoms, the best of those empires, and be able to see how we can utilize it today. Now, there's a lot of things in there. We won't be able to have, we won't have time to go into it in a greater length. I'm just sort of outlining the broad lines that we're going to be breaking down, unpacking over the next several weeks as we talk about this subject of the African mentality and the mindset, and how we can improve it to improve our lives, to improve the lives of our nations and our communities. And the second thing was obviously culture. We need to look at our own culture. We come from an oral culture where a lot of what our ancestors did was not recorded in written forms, but it was passed down through oral tradition. Now, there is some good benefit of that, but there's also some limitations to that, because if things are not recorded, and then it becomes difficult to maintain, to keep those that wealth for a long time, because it actually disintegrates as it gets passed down. Even though in many civilizations in Africa, a lot of those wisdom, a lot of that wisdom was kept quite well in many of those countries. So what is it that we get from African culture? There are many cultures, because there's no one single culture in Africa. There are many, but what are the good parts of our culture, and what are some of the things that we should abandon, and in order to embrace other things that maybe would serve us better? Because culture is dynamic. It shouldn't be fixed. We shouldn't just keep everything that we had in the past, even if it doesn't serve us anymore. We should continue to evolve in terms of improving our culture, bring new things. Every culture actually benefits from the connection with other cultures, and we can learn from others, whether it's the European and the Asians and many other cultures, but we shouldn't forget our own. There's a core of our culture that we need to be able to maintain, and that is also part of what is in the mindset of Africans. Again, it needs to be unpacked, because in the culture there are beliefs, there are rituals, there are a whole range of things that need to be acknowledged. And then the third thing in that is education. Education, again, I made the point earlier that a lot of our education is still Western-centered, and we haven't quite updated. But I'm not just talking about the formal education that we get at school. I'm also talking about personal learning, personal education, which is something that I think we need to do more in our African culture. I suppose because of the oral tradition, a lot of us don't read as much as we should. Again, it doesn't apply for everyone, but that culture of reading, writing and reading, is one that we still have to embrace. Many of the books that we read have been written outside, and many books are not written and they are not read by our own people. So it is important to be able to look at how we can increase our production of knowledge. But in order to do that, we have to educate ourselves first, and knowing who we are, what we want as people, and where we want to go, our future, and how we want to get there, and what are the resources that we need in order to be able to get there. So those are important questions that, again, because of the political instability in many African countries, our government have not really had sufficient investment into cleaning up things that need to be removed from our education, and giving the resources that is required to really establish the core, to build an education system that is up to the 21st century challenges. Because the challenges of today are many. In many of our countries, we're still actually learning a lot of these theoretical things. I was having a conversation with a friend recently about the fact that in the Congo, for example, many of the universities that we have produce, lawyers and many of these philosophers, and then people who can talk, and they talk very nice, but we do need maybe more technical schools that will produce people who can actually do things with their hand, engineers and builders and all that sort of thing. Because we do need these things for our own development. We see what is happening in China, for example, China and even South Korea, for example, that have become, very, very developed. They were almost at the same level that Africa was after the independence. In fact, even a little bit behind. But they have not been able to. They've been able to make significant amount of progress while we've stayed back because we have not sufficiently invested in our education. Which, when you look at what is happening, for example, in South Korea, the education system there is quite advanced, and children spend a lot of time at school. I was told that in South Korea, children are picked up by their parents from school, or they come back from school at about 9 p.m. They've got these extra curriculum activity that is still, managed by the school up to about 9 p.m. So there's a lot of investment in the education system, and not much is happening in many of our African countries, let alone the self-development, self-learning sort of a mindset that we need to have, because school is supposed to normally prepare you to, give you the ability to read and write, and then you should start learning things that really can make a significant amount of difference in your life. Because we may have all these diplomas, but they're not getting us anywhere. These diplomas that we get, and which we need to be able to do something with, but we don't, because even when you get a diploma, you do get a job. You get out of school or university and you don't get a job. Unemployment is a big issue in most of our African countries. So that's another issue. We'll look at everything that relates to the education system, the curriculum, the resources, and what sort of policies and strategies that are being used by African countries to improve the education. So that is the third pillar, so to speak, of this series. And the next one is about community. When I talk community, your mind is significantly shaped by your environment, your social environment. That's what I mean by community. Where you live, the area where you live, the people you see, the things you do that everybody else does, or the things you see around will determine to a great extent how you are shaped intellectually. So what are some of the things that are affecting our communities, both in Africa, the mother continent, as well as in the diaspora? There's still a lot of issues in our communities where, for example, I'll just give you an example. In countries such as Australia, US, and many European countries, small businesses, the culture of entrepreneurship is quite advanced. And we should also be able to get to that. But you see that we're still quite behind when it comes to entrepreneurship, because I suppose we don't have a lot of that in our culture. Or we may do, actually, because there are a lot of countries that have been sort of entrepreneurial for quite some time. But it's a different sort of game when you come to developed countries where rules are different, and the market is very competitive. You have to be very creative. You have to be innovative. You have to know what you are doing and play your game very well in order to survive. I see a lot of Africans that start businesses and they don't survive for long. Now, we know that that's generally the case. Even in Australia, about 70% of businesses that are open, they close doors within the first 12 months. But we ought to be able to do more, because when you look at what is happening in the Indian communities, in the Chinese communities, in the Jewish communities, many of the migrants, they actually do a lot of good work in terms of developing their businesses. So what are we doing as a community to encourage more of that? And we don't have to rely on the government, because sometimes you have the impression that people are relying too much on the government for this sort of thing. These are things that we should be able to do ourselves. And then again, I know that some communities are better than others in this. For example, the Nigerian community is quite entrepreneurial. The Somali community, the Ethiopian community, just as an example, in Australia, and that may apply in many other countries as well. But I can speak only about Australia, where I have the experience over the last 20 years or so. So some communities are doing actually better, and others are falling behind. What do we do to sort of close the gap and encourage more entrepreneurship? Because economic power is critical to the development of our communities. So we can't rely on jobs anymore. In fact, jobs are becoming not only rare, but very insecure. You may have a job today and tomorrow it is gone. What do you do? So you have to have multiple streams of income. You can start slowly. There's a lot of knowledge out there on the internet. You can learn yourself. There's a lot of tools out there, online tools, and many others to help you start a business. So we'll be looking at this community aspect of the African mindset over the next several weeks, and we will have different people who will come to speak to us in relation to this. And then the fourth thing is about experience. When I say experience, I mean the variety of experiences that we can expose ourselves to, whether it's work, whether it's people that we spend time with, the sort of things that we do. That is very important. Professional experience. Now, for example, in this country, in Australia, a lot of young people start looking for jobs, from very early, 16, sometimes even 15, 16, 17. They get into the employment sector. They may not get paid much, but they get used to being employed, knowing the rules of the workplace, and building experience, and they start earning income. Now, in many of our communities, our young people are having a lot of difficulty finding jobs because youth unemployment is actually quite high. So many of our youth are lacking in that experience, that professional experience, because you do learn a lot from work. I think actually that you learn a lot from work than you learn at school. School obviously gives you the foundation, but professionally, the fact that you work with people, you see a lot of things happening in big institutions or big companies, you see how things are being managed, you do learn a lot. And we need to look at ways that we can improve the situation in our own communities to get many of our children to start being employed quite early. But that will only improve if ourselves we can. That's why I was talking about the employment. The entrepreneurship early. If we have our own small businesses, we can employ our own young people. But we are lacking still in that area, or we're not doing as good as we should do, and that is a bit of an issue. So we need to be able to create experiences that help people to develop themselves professionally and also develop themselves just on a personal level, because personal development, which is a self-learning for the sake of improving your thinking, improving your future, taking your destiny in your own hands, not taking no for an answer. If you have a dream, you can pursue it. Even if you have difficulties, how do you overcome that? All of those things are actually very important. So we will be talking about the various experiences that define the African person, and specifically how that relates to the mindset that many of us have developed. And the last one, before we'll get my guest to come in the next few minutes, is about spirituality. I think that is very important. Even though not all Africans are spiritual, but the majority of us are quite spiritual. It's something that we've acquired from our culture, from our parents, from our community. We either, Christians or Muslims or even animists. They have that sense of that spiritual sense, that understanding that there's something bigger than themselves, and that this world is much more complex than what we see in with our eyes. So that spiritual insight that we may have is actually very important. But it could also be a problem, because many of our beliefs, religious beliefs, can also, as much as they can serve us, but they can also be a problem. And I see some of the things that are happening, for example, in Christianity. I'm Christian myself and quite active in my church. And I know some of the things that I see in the broader church do pose a problem. In the Muslim side, there are also a few issues about radicalization and all that sort of thing. So spirituality is a good thing. It enables us to sort of have some understanding of the world that goes beyond the material, and we ought to be able to understand how we can utilize spirituality to advance our lives. Faith that we may have, which can drive us, because the most important benefit you get from faith is is driving you, motivating you to do more than what you can otherwise do. Sometimes when you see difficulties, it may be easy to stop, but if you're driven by faith, you can push yourself quite a lot further, and knowing that you also have some sort of supernatural support that can assist you in that, especially if you get an understanding of your purpose in life, your destiny. That helps a lot. By the way, I wrote a book about focus on destiny that talks about that topic. It's simply about understanding that we are in this world for our purpose. It's not just we haven't come into this world just by accident. At least that's what many of us believe. We are not product of accident, but we are product of design. It's not serendipity; it is design. And as such, we have something that we have to do and something that we have to leave as a legacy when we depart. So that's just one thing that is important. So we'll look at spirituality as well and how that affects the minds of Africans, and that will be part of the discussions. Again, as I said, these are 5 broad points, 5 broad topics that are linked to this theme of looking at African mindset, and we will look into that in detail as we go. I am going to be getting my guest in a moment, with whom I'm going to start talking about some of these things, just to introduce a new insight, a new point of view in how we can improve things in terms of elevating ourselves to a different level, where we use our minds to support us to move forward, and how we improve ourselves as individuals, our own communities, and our country, and being really in control of the whole process, rather than being either dictated or sort of copying others, because we have these original we have a sense of originality. Africa is the cradle of humanity, it is said, and we have a lot that we can bring into this world, as long as we take the responsibility to develop ourselves and be able to contribute to what the rest of the world is doing. Okay, so I will be bringing my guest in now. Barry Mustafa is an engineer from a Senegalese background. He's lived in Australia for a long time. He's been on this platform before, and is someone that we're also going to be seeing a bit more, because he's going to be part of this series of African mindset. As an engineer, I think he can teach us quite a few things, because I think that in Africa, for example, we do need a whole lot more engineers to bring the technology, the tools that we need to develop our countries. We can't just rely on what is coming from outside. So that engineering mindset of seeing a problem and fixing it and creating tools and developing it and improving it, that sort of thing we need more in Africa, in addition to all this. I mean, obviously, all these philosophies are, for example, in the French culture or the Francophone culture, we've inherited a lot of the philosophical, the theoretical things we get from the French. But anyway, we'll talk about that with Barry in a moment. Barry, how are you going tonight?
I'm good, thank you, Fred. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. So this is a new series of discussions we're going to be having on African mindset. We want to try to look into that more broadly, and we will start with some of the impact of colonization and neo-colonization in the minds of Africans. Before you came on air, I was sort of outlining some 5 key points in this topic, which I think would help to explain what is relevant with regards to our mindset. I talked about our history with the kingdoms and the empires that have existed for millennia before the colonial masters came to Africa, And there's a lot of things in there that we need to look into. And then there's the history of colonization with everything that is brought to Africa, both the good and the bad, mostly the bad as far as I'm concerned. And even though after the colonial powers have gone, neo-colonialism is still there. But we will look at some of those things, and then we'll look also at the sort of social conditioning, the community aspect of, and how that impacts the mind. We'll also look at spirituality. We'll also look at the education system. So just to give you a bit of a context, I'm not sure if you were watching before you came in, but I'll start with one question. What comes to your mind when you think of the African mindset?
Well, it's quite a wide subject. It's a very complex one as well. But at the same time, I think if we look at it very closely, when we're talking about the mindset, African mindset, I think putting the issue out there does mean that actually there is an issue of mindset. Now, people do have mindset. Now, the question is whether that mindset is orientated in a way that benefit them and benefit the common kind of the society as a whole. That's where we have a problem. What comes to my mind when I think about African mindset is the fact that we've been independent for 6 years or more for some other countries, or less for a minority of African countries. We've been independent for all that time, like you said earlier. But in actual fact, we still having the same, asking ourselves the same questions as like kind of our forefathers were actually asking themselves 60 years ago. So we actually haven't moved forward in the way we're thinking about our future. We're thinking first about our present, our future, and thinking about our future perspective for ourselves and for our peoples. Every country, African country, or every African that you meet, that you start talking with, you actually realize that question is there. How come after so long we still have kind of issues with development? We still have issues with education. We still have issues with healthcare system. We still have issues with the perspective for the young people. We still have kind of people in the western part of the continent where I come from, young people who are still defying the seas and the desert because they want to run away and go to Europe. Why do we still have kind of those kind of issues? If you talk to individual Africans, everyone got an opinion as to why. But the issue is there, and that's the reason why I find this opportunity to talk about this topic to be very important, because we need to discuss those issues. We need to have an exchange on those, because this question won't go away, until there are solutions for these issues. We do have a huge potential. The African continent has huge potential. The African people have huge potential. We are not worse than anyone else. We are as competent, as good as anyone else in the world. But why is that we are not able to fix those problems for ourselves and for our people? That's a question.
Yeah, that's obviously a big question. Do you think that we are sufficiently aware and conscious of the I suppose serious nature of this question, and are we doing anything, whether as individuals or communities or even our leaders, whether in Africa or in the diaspora context? Is that level of awareness sufficient as far as you're concerned?
Well, look, I think the people who should be conscious of that probably are not conscious of that enough, or they are not strategically conscious of that. Everyone cannot be conscious of those kind of topics because they can be complex for some people. They shouldn't be complex for people who have the responsibility of making decisions, of deciding for the people. So in general, if you take a population, any country, the level of understanding of those strategic key questions are not for everyone to grasp, but people who have taken the responsibility to lead those countries, to lead our countries, should be aware of the strategical importance of all discussions. The problem is, I don't believe that the people who have been responsible for the leadership of our countries until now do understand the importance of this question. And that's the reason why we haven't moved much from 1960 until now. You talked about education. You talked about like the content of the education system. You talked about the policies that have been put forward in order to help our people develop and help our, because when you talk to mindset, you talk also about the level of development. Okay, when we talk about development, it's not only about buildings, but it's a whole set of things, and mindset come to play in that. You know, you can't build a developed environment if the mindset, there is no mindset for a lot of things to take into account. You know, and that's where we have to build the foundation. I think that foundation wasn't built from the beginning, but it's not too late to do it, and we need to start doing it as soon as possible. You know, and that's where the issues is.
All right. Now, let's just pick one thing out of the history, sort of broad point, and we talk about colonization. I would want actually to start with the influence that we get from the previous kingdoms and empire, but I'll just jump onto the colonization. You know, the Western colonizers have gone, but in Africa, for example, our political leadership is still very much dependent on that influence. Why aren't we able to free ourselves from it?
Because but the majority of it, I think we didn't have from the beginning the right leadership for most of the countries, because at the end of the day, for most of the countries, at least the part of the African continent I come from, independencies were something that were negotiated with the colonial powers, and the colonial powers made sure that they leave behind people who would continue what they have started, people who wouldn't change much in the way things were being run. And that's the kind of statu quo that in many of the West Africa, I don't want to use the terminology of francophone because it's got a lot of negative connotation to it, and that's something probably that we can talk about later. But those countries are still kind of in the mindset of what the mindset of the colonized. Okay, we are free, but we are not 100% free in our mind. You know, our leaders still have kind of the mindset of thinking in a very extroverted manner, you know, where they think that they need to take always advice from the old colonizing power. They think that they can't do anything. And so they haven't helped their people. They haven't helped themselves to free themselves from that colonial bondage. And that's where we have a problem, you know. So I think until we are able to start thinking independently and taking our initiatives and thinking about our people and about the interests of our people, we won't get there. Because whether you like it or not, whether you take it, whether it's France, whether it's Britain, whether it's Germany, whether it's Australia, any country, look after their own interests first, you know. And the problem we have in our countries is that I think people who lead those countries don't have a sense of what is the interests of their people. They think about their own interests and their families first, but they're not able to think beyond that, you know. That's what I can understand in all that. In the majority of the country, that's a problem we have, you know. We need to have leadership who can lead the people, drive the people in a way that we think about the common good first before anything else. Until we get that, we are not going to be moving anyway, you know. And that's the challenge we have today, and the challenge that we have to overcome.
Yeah, that is indeed a challenge we have today, and a challenge we have to overcome. But for example, even in terms of the let's go into the production of knowledge. If you look at I don't have numbers or I mean statistics on this, but I don't know how many books are produced by Africans every year, and how many books.
Oh, no, the knowledge, to be honest with you, I think we don't have an issue with that, because knowledge is always something that is something that always that develop. Now the problem is whether it's writing books, whether it's making discoveries, whether it's inventing things and stuff like that. The knowledge is there. The problem is whether this knowledge or all those things, positive things that are coming from the people and from people's brains, are promoted well enough. You know, I can show you kind of dozens and hundreds of things that young people or even older people are doing, whether it's writing books, whether it's inventing new ways of doing things. But unless the things are taken and promoted and put to use for the majority of population, you won't get there. You know, you won't get noticed. You know, people are doing things. If you're talking about drones, whether you talk about agricultural methods, whether you're talking about African people are doing a lot of things out there. You know, but if you have the political leadership, the right political mindset, people in power who are to take those things and promoting it and making it as big as it so it can benefit the majority of people, that's what's lacking, you know. But I think in terms of knowledge, we do have a lot of things that are being under difficult circumstances, but things are happening.
Yeah, but one of the problems is that if you obviously, I agree that a lot of our politicians and government are only really taking care of themselves when they get in power. But that is in itself, we have to look at that to go a little bit deeper. Why is that happening? Why aren't we able to get politicians or leaders who can really look after us, the people? Why aren't we able to put systems that will enable leaders to really do their job and not spread corruption and wanting to stay in power for as long as they want to? Why is that mentality still there? And it's not just for Africans in the continent. I see even people from the diaspora community who, when it comes to power, the same mentality is there. And when they go back to Africa, they kind of actually do the same thing. So it's everywhere. Why? What is the source of that?
Well, the source of that, I think, is human. Just human beings. That's just the way humans behave. It's not something that is specific to Africans only. It's what I call like kind of a third world mentality, where we and the third world mentality doesn't apply to the third world people only. It can apply to anywhere, like to anyone. I think anyone or in any society. The thing is, when a human being is given the possibility and the opportunity, there are no kind of mechanism to control our greed, to control our willingness to cling to power or to continue. People will exploit it, you know, because we don't have mechanism in place to implement good governance, to implement like kind of checks and balances and stuff like that, strong kind of institutions to make sure that people can't take advantage. That's the reason why. Again, like I was saying, our countries are very young. Most of our countries are 6 years or less than 6 years old, and that's in the scale of a nation. It's not much. So we are nations that are building. We are nations that are in the process of rebuilding themselves. We are rebuilding using a system that we didn't have kind of knowledge of, that we're learning to understand, and we're trying to build something after so much trauma, so much like kind of so many difficulties that we had and all that we're still facing. So we're dealing with so many factors at the same time. That makes it very difficult for us. But I think we are making progress, but progress is very slow. And the first thing what could accelerate that process, that progress, is if we had the right leadership in the countries that can afford it and in the societies that deserve it. At the moment, if you look at every country individually, it's an issue. Some countries are doing better than others, but majority of countries are struggling with the issue of leadership. We're talking about elections. Just talk about, if you take democratic elections, how many countries since independence have organized more than 10 elections? There is probably not, almost, you know. Most of the countries probably have done 3, 4, 5, 6, or maybe, if you're lucky, 7, you know. So we don't have, the system is still building itself. You take South American countries, there are countries who have gotten out of colonial bondage for more than 100 years, like some of them even 200 years, majority of them 200 years. So it's a long time, but they're still struggling with a lot of the issues that we have in today. But we have only 50 and 60, but we have gone through so much trauma, so we need to look at it like kind of in that light as well. Everything is not, I think, doom and gloom out there. There are a lot of things that could be done better. There are a lot of things that we can do better, but we still have issues. We still have challenges. We need to challenge. And the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that we have the right leadership. We can talk about corruption, we talk about it, but until you get the right leadership in place, patriotic leadership everywhere where it matters, we won't get there. That's the problem.
How do we get,
our first problem
is that right leadership? What do we need to do to increase the chance of us having the leaders that we deserve?
People will have to challenge the system. People will have to have the political consciousness to understand what is right, what is wrong, to understand their rights and all that, and to make sacrifices. If the system is democratic or is not democratic. If it's not democratic, what can we do to challenge the system and push it until it changes? I think that's the only way. People always deal with injustices with the means that they have. It can be via peaceful means or it can be via violence, and that's what I would probably be saying, that when system is the system of fallacy that has been put in place by people who want to exploit the system to continue being in power, we need to find people have to have the education, political education, to help them have political education to challenge the system. And that's what you can see is happening in many countries where you're having unrest and all that. People are pushed to the ground, are pushed like kind of to a level where they can't take it anymore. And then after that, something happens. It's rebellion, whatever and all that, because the political system is closed, is locked into something like kind of that can't continue. People take their responsibilities. People will have to take their responsibilities. And that's what I can see.
And the role that the African intellectual elite, so to speak, can play. Let's just take an example of us in the diaspora. Understanding, because we see where we live and how the system works and how countries are being developed. If you want to be able to do something, some of us have tried. It seems like you're hitting a brick wall when you go back to Africa and you're trying to do things.
Yep.
Even the way that the government organizes themselves, they're building a system to protect their own interest. And when you see that this is not right, but what can you do? So you either have to find a way to organize some sort of rebellion or revolution of the mind, that is. But what should the diaspora do to, I suppose, contribute to raising that level of political education that is needed to bring about the leaders that we need?
There are a lot of things that we can do. Even that what you said right now, people who are going back and trying and failing, and I think that's what we need to continue doing. There are so many ways that we can raise political consciousness on people by trying whatever we're trying today, whether it's starting businesses, whether it's taking some initiatives in your own suburb where you come from or in your city where you come from, pushing all those, because these are all political statements. When you try to build something for people in order to make people's life better, that's in itself is a political statement. Like raising people's awareness of political kind of consciousness doesn't come only through a way of political discourse. It can come through like kind of citizenship kind of initiatives, economic initiatives and stuff like that. So by trying and failing and people seeing why you have failed and all that, they learn from that. If people that you're trying to help see that you're failing because the system is not allowing you to succeed, they would see that the system actually is hindering kind of the opportunity that are there. Another person come and try. So by continuing and pushing and all that, that in itself like help people who are locally there to understand where the problem is, and I think we shouldn't give up. The diaspora shouldn't give up. Whether those countries, whether our continent people out there want a change or not, change will happen. They can delay it, but it will happen. So we shouldn't give up. I think we should continue pushing. The fact that we try and we fail once or twice shouldn't discourage it. I think we should continue pushing. At the end of the day, this is our country. That's where we come from. We won't give it in the hands of people who wanna kind of cannibalize the country, use their resources for their own good, or like sell it to the old colonial powers and stuff like that. No, it doesn't belong to them. We need to continue pushing and make sure that we don't give up, because that's what they want. They want us to give up, and we need to make sure that we don't give them that pleasure. That's the way I'm saying.
It looks like there's a bit of a vicious circle. For example, what I mean by that is, well, in order to get the leaders that we really need, we have to have a high level of political education of the population, and that also depends on education, period. I mean, people have to be somehow educated before you can educate them politically, in most cases. But then for the people to be educated, there ought to be leadership that invest the resources and the attention that is needed to build good schools and all that sort of thing. But because the leaders are already there and they are corrupt for most of them, and they want to keep the system, so you really don't know where to start. I'm thinking maybe if we just develop maybe more businesses, because economic power can also raise the education level.
Absolutely.
And potentially contribute. Where are your thoughts in some of these things?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think, like, I absolutely agree with you. I think raising political awareness doesn't come only through kind of a political discourse or investing. It can be in so many manners, and kind of investing in businesses or small business and stuff like that at local level are all kind of a political statement. These are all political ways of advancing the agenda of changing something in the future, and that's what we need to continue doing. But before kind of that, I think it's important also to educate people, help people who have their own business, kind of be business owners, but at the same time educate them on a kind of basic ways of managing business. Because majority of people, Africans, like to venture in businesses, but the problem is a lot of them don't understand the mechanism of managing a business. As Africans in general, and sorry, I'm generalizing here, most of us, our societies are kind of based on communities, and so we are very social. So when you have a business and the social takeover, that can be a problem, because we do appreciate people based on how socially kind of interactive or how socially helpful they are. That can't work always with business, and people have to be educated in a way that they're able to differentiate the social from the economic, the social from the business sense, and stuff like that. And I think that's where we need to raise awareness for people to be economically independent, to be able to make business decisions, and to be able to run a business, no matter how small it is, so that they can understand the best way to run a profitable business. And that's valid only for that's also valid for the African that live in Africa, but also African that are in the diaspora. And that's very, very important. Yeah.
And one of the member of the audience, Dr. William Abu, says lack of creativity and innovation is also part of the problem. Do you agree? Do we tend to have low level?
Absolutely. I think I agree with that observations, because just take an example. In most of our communities, right, whether it's here or whether it's back home, if you start a business in a particular area, okay, if it's successful or you start becoming successful, next thing you will see, everyone else around you will be doing the same thing. So people don't think outside of the circle. They don't go far in order to make innovative kind of decisions or finding innovative ways of pushing the boundaries. That is a problem, and that's also come with kind of some. Not everyone is like that. I know people who haven't been to school, but they have the business instinct of detecting where there is kind of a niche market and how to exploit it. Some people have it, but not everyone have it, and not everyone got the business sense. So this lack of creativity and lack of innovation, yes, it is an issue, but also it comes with individual kind of people being aware. They will try once, twice, they failed it 3 times, and then probably some people will start learning and will make the right decisions. But I'm sure it's just something that is kind of a work in progress, and we eventually will there. You will see people who will start succeeding after failing. The good thing about our people is that we are extremely resilient. People don't give up. Whether you take it like back in Africa or here, our people don't give up, and that's probably our gift. We fail and fail again, but people will keep trying. And that's probably the secret of our survival capability.
Another member of the audience, Jackson Monebatu, says, I don't think debating on individual level has a lot of limitations. I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but I suppose debates have to start somewhere. You can start from a small circle and then go the next level. But again, I suppose perhaps what he may be referring to is the fact that we tend to do a lot of things individually as Africans. We are yet to learn to really work together, to work harmoniously. That is visible both in Africa as well as in the diaspora, and that is hindering progress. So part of education, I was watching a video, I think it was Dr. Uma, the guy in America, was saying that one of the key goals of education should be to teach people to work together, to socialize, not just for the social comfort, but to be able to work together. And that is a big problem in Africa, isn't it?
Well, I personally favor individual initiatives. I don't think like working in kind of as working together, not to develop things like kind of a business and stuff like that. I am a true believer in individual initiative taking. Now, when you're talking about working together, if you're talking about harmony and fostering a climate of harmony and mutual understanding, yes. But when it comes to business initiatives, I probably favor more individual kind of creativity, individual initiative, rather than kind of doing things kind of in common. To some extent, yes, it can help, but I think you need to leave people with the freedom of making decisions and taking initiative and taking ventures. Now, on another level where working together can help is that debate about political or about consciousness in general. That's necessary. We need to have this conversation. We need to learn from each other and all that, to understand what are the strategic issues that we're facing and see how the best way to go about it. But when it comes to finding the solutions, I favor more letting people go about their ways and finding a way of making sure, because if individually we become successful, it becomes easier for us as a community to come together and become successful. But if we are all unsuccessful, it makes it very hard for us to make it.
Now, I suppose, things like business, you can start a business venture individually, but you're still going to rely on that team spirit as that the business develops, for the work that is done within the business, even though it is a business that belongs to someone who initiated it. But if the work culture doesn't have that team, if in Australia, whatever business you go to, they will always have a variety of strategies and tools to develop teamwork within the business, even though the business will belong to somebody as a private business. But if that work culture is not there, then I think it is one of the biggest problems that we are facing.
Yeah, that can be a problem. But again, I don't know the extent of the issue there. I mean, if you're talking about a business that would rely only on African kind of contribution, on African kind of manpower to make that business progress, then yes, maybe it's an issue. I am not very much kind of I don't have much information or data in terms of understanding what the extent of the issue if you take it like based on Africans only. But I think if you have a successful business in a particular area, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility as a business owner to choose the best people to work in your team to make sure that you're successful. Regardless of whether they're Africans or not, I think it's important to make sure that you choose the best human resources to work in the culture that you want to instill in your team, and not just taking people because they're just Africans. I think even if they're Africans, you need to make sure that you choose the best among those who can do the job to do the job for you. And that's where I think it matters the most.
We're approaching the end of this show. In the next 5 minutes, I'm just gonna first I'll ask quickly a question about that. I mentioned when you were coming onto the air about that engineering type of mindset, problem-solving sort of skills that I think we do need a lot in Africa, given our level of development. We should have a lot more engineers than lawyers and any of these other qualifications with big diplomas that don't really create much value in the community. Do you agree with that? And what should be done to facilitate that?
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Now, the other thing also, I think is important to understand what the extent of our problems. If you take, for example, you can take hundreds or thousands of engineers, unless you understand, you analyze, understand your issue, understand the extent of your problem, you will be just turning in circle. I think it's important for us to have analytical people. It's important to have engineering people. You need to have people who are builders. You have all these resources are important, because the important thing, the thing is the striking thing in our countries is that everything is urgent. Everything is urgent, whether you take it kind of in terms of the education system, whether you take it in terms of agriculture, whether you take it in terms of like kind of engineering, like kind of you're talking about roads and buildings and everything. Everything is urgent. So we need all these resources to make sure. You need people to help you understand what the extent. Now, the thing is, the most important thing is whether those people's mindset is orientated at the right level, in the right direction. You can have the best engineers, but unless they have the competence and they have the right mindset, it won't help you. And that's where we need to have an assessment of all our resources and making sure whether they're internal or in the diaspora, and seeing what the best way to use them. And that's where I think the challenge is.
All right. So maybe one or two more questions, and then that'll be the end of it. We've sort of highlighted many of the issues. What are the solutions? What are the steps that we should take? And I know there are different actors at different levels to resolve this huge problem of the mindset that we have, which is a barrier to our own development. But where do we start? What do you think should be the priority in addressing this?
Very, very tough question. That's a very tough question. Like I said, in a situation where you have everything around you is urgent, it's very hard to pick and choose what is the most critical thing that you need to start with. But where to start from is probably, I think, the important thing. Like I said, human resources is very important. You need to have the right resources from the leadership, the country's leadership, all the way down. You need to make sure that we have a clear assessment of who is capable of doing what and who is doing what. Whether it's the political leadership, whether it's the leadership, administrative leadership, and everything, and looking at everyone what is there that is required to do, and what resources we have available, the right resources we have available to do it, and have the right people in the right positions to do the job, to assess the situation and to do the job. And I think that's where the priority is.
All right, that's one way to start addressing the problem. As you said, it's obviously a very huge issue, and none of us has any sort of magical bullet to fix all of that, but at least we're starting the conversation, and we would like to encourage people watching to be part of this initiative where we talk about some of the issues that affect our mindset, that some of these issues are hindering us for our own development as individuals, as well as obviously affecting the development of our communities here in the diaspora, as well as in the mother continent. And African professionals have that responsibility to be able to do what they can to develop the countries, because obviously we have the education, the resources and the willingness to do it. But there are a lot of barriers on the way, and we need to find ways to remove that. And everything starts with a conversation, and eventually that can build into other things. Next conversation on this series of Inside the Mind of Africans will be to look at some of the emotional issues. It has been said many times that Africans tend to be a little bit more emotional, and that could actually cause issues, because when you're starting to look at how to develop systems, you need to often take the emotion out of that, build a system where things are logical, rational, and one step leads into another. Well, if there's a lot of emotion that comes into the system, then it may be very difficult to address it. But that's just one of the things that we'll be looking at, amongst many others, in the next few days and weeks. Barry, I want to say thank you for coming to talk to us about this. This is the beginning, but certainly not the end. There will be a lot more conversations where we'll have a bit of a panel discussions. Tonight was simply just to sort of describe the broad points that we're going to be addressing, and we will invite you again with other people to discuss this. I don't know if you have any last word before we go.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Clyde. This is, I think, like I said at the beginning, there are very important issues. I think it's a great initiative from you to start this kind of conversation up among us. I think the conversation should continue. We do have a number of challenges, but I am confident that we will overcome them. How long it's going to take us, I don't know. But whether it's back in Africa or anywhere we are, I think we do have an extraordinary kind of ability to be resilient and to overcome kind of challenges. And I think sooner or later we will overcome those. That is very good that we're having the conversation. We started talking about the conversation, talking about the issues, and talking about the possible solutions. I think that's the way to go. So I'm just looking forward to the next theme of conversation that are coming, and more than happy to participate in those exchanges.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry, and have a good night. For those watching, please share the video and subscribe on our YouTube channel so that you are notified when we have new publications. And also, if you are able to contribute in this conversation, feel welcome to contact us, and we may invite you to be part of the guest or the panel to talk about this important thing. I want to say thank you to Jackson Monabit, who's been commenting a lot, Samuel, Dr. William Abur, and many others on the watching live tonight. Thank you very much, and have a good night. For those who are in Australia, and I know people may be watching this from anywhere, and whatever you're doing, enjoy it, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.